Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights.
Good. So I will get started. My name is Gabriella Stern. I'm Director of Communications at the World Health Organization. And today's press conference is about today's Pandemic Preparedness and Response high-level meeting, which is ongoing, as well as the declaration which was approved this morning. And we have a really huge turnout of media from around the world, and I'm grateful to you for that. Thanks for joining. I'm going to introduce our speakers. In the middle, we have Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. I'm hearing an echo. Benji, maybe you can. Thank you so much. We're being helped by the wonderful UN team. So Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization. To his right is Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO's Emergencies Program. To Dr. Tedros' left is Dr. Sylvie Briand, Director of Epidemic and Pandemic Preparedness and Prevention at the World Health Organization, also in the Emergencies Program. And to her left is Dr. Joad Majour, who is head of the Secretariat for the INB and IHR working groups, who are working on the Pandemic Accord and the strengthening of the international health regulations. So without any further ado, I'll ask Dr. Tedros to make opening remarks, and then we'll go to media Q&A. And one last housekeeping thing is our principals need to leave at 12:30 New York time, so we have a hard stop at 12:30. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Tedros.
Okay. If the culture is to stand from here, it's 2 minutes, so I will stand. It's 2 minutes, so I will do it in standing. First of all, I would like to thank the members of the press for joining us today. And as you know, this morning, the 193 member states of the United Nations approved the political declaration on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The declaration is a strong signal from countries that they are committed to learning the lessons of the COVID-19 pandemic and to strengthening the world's defenses against pandemics. For too long, the world has operated on a cycle of panic and neglect. When an epidemic or pandemic strikes, countries have responded in crisis mode, and when it passes, they move on to the next crisis and fail to learn the lessons that could prevent or mitigate the next epidemic or pandemic. We owe it to those we have lost to learn the painful lessons COVID-19 has taught us and to make the changes that will keep our children and grandchildren safer from the pandemics of the future. Because we know that the next pandemic is a question of when, not if. If the declaration, in the declaration approved today, member states have demonstrated that even at this time of division and polarization, it's still possible for countries to come together to agree on a shared response to shared threats. It is that same spirit of collaboration that we urge countries to demonstrate as they continue their negotiations on the pandemic accord and the amendments to the international health regulations. COVID-19 is a devastating reminder that for everything that divides us, we are one humanity sharing one planet. We have no future but a shared future. I thank you, and Gabi, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. And now we'll go to media Q&A. Please raise your hands. Let's see, this is a different platform than I'm used to, so apologies if I miss you. We do have a question in the chat. Ari Daniel from NPR. Thanks for joining, Ari. Over to you.
Thank you. Yes, my question relates to the pandemic treaty that's underway, and I'm curious to know, I know that there's some work being done this week to get heads of state to put forward this kind of political declaration in order to encourage countries to continue with negotiations. But I know it's kind of stalled out. So I was wondering, what are the hopes for a kind of bold treaty to come into force in May?
Thanks, Ari. I'm wondering if Jawad Majur, Dr. Majur would like to take that one.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for this question. As you mentioned, the political declaration support the ongoing processes in Geneva, namely the discussion about the pandemic accord and the amendment of the HR. INB members will meet in 2 days in Geneva to discuss the next steps. And while the discussion in very critical moment that the Bureau of the INB asked to provide a negotiation text for the next meeting of the INB, the member states now are will look to the text and agree on the next steps. And as you are familiar with the various versions of the text, this text include everything which is important for pandemic preparedness response, including equity, including financing, technology transfer, and other very important element. And the member state now need to come together to agree on text. In terms of the next steps, the INB will meet first week of November to start negotiation, another meeting the first week of December, and 2 meetings next year, two weeks meeting in February and 2 weeks meeting in March to finalize the negotiation, hoping that we can a text that be approved by May 24, and this was requested by the political declaration and other head of state leader statement.
Thanks, Joanne. Mike, do you want to jump in?
No, I thank you, Jawad, and the accord that's been negotiated in Geneva is truly a generational agreement. There are large issues at stake. It takes the time it takes. What's most important is the commitment that's been shown by the member states of the World Health Organization. These are really important matters. Millions of people died in this pandemic, and others are at threat from so many other infectious diseases and health emergencies. We need to get this right. But without an agreement between sovereign states on how we're going to collectively manage, and Tedros mentioned that word so many times today in his speech, we have collective responsibility, we have collective accountability to the people we serve, to the vulnerable communities out there who suffered in this pandemic. And as someone who spent a quarter of a century serving in the front line, today is a really important day out there for health workers, for frontline workers, for community health workers, for everyone who works out there supporting communities at times of health crisis. The declaration today is it's a message to them that they matter, the communities matter, and that the world is going to do better at protecting communities, better at scaling clinical care, better at surveillance, better at sharing medical countermeasures. Today is a really important day, and I think it will drive the momentum towards the Accord next year in Geneva. So today is a victory for public health, today is a victory for communities, today is a victory for multilateralism, and I hope we can use that momentum, and the member states will use that momentum with Dr. Tedros' leadership to guide us to a generational agreement that will change the future for those people we all serve.
Thanks, Mike. DG.
Yeah, just to add a bit, Jawad and Mike have already covered. Now what we expect is to have the pandemic accord by May 2024. That's what the member states actually set as a deadline. Of course, as you have said, the process is a bit slow, and there are issues, contentious issues that has to be addressed. But the good thing is, these areas are now identified, and member states are going to get into real negotiation for or 5 issues that is dividing them. But I hope that they will have a way to address the differences and have a common ground. As you know, this generation has experienced this pandemic after a century. Meaning we are what you call the lived community. We know how it feels. We know to what extent its impact has been and still is. And it's this generation that should write the accord or the agreement or the convention because we know what it means. And that's why we believe that without losing the momentum, the accord should be agreed within the set deadline, that's May 2024. You know, a generation that will come will not have the same experience, and that's why we say the generation with the experience should write it. And I hope that's clear to our member states, and they're doing their best. And we hope that the accord will be finalized by the set date, and we will have the accord by May 2024. And today's declaration is very historic. It's the first of its kind, by the way, and we hope it will give energy. It will give the negotiation energy and push it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Tedros. We have a question in the room. Could you identify yourself? Thanks.
Hi, this is De Zhixu with China Central Television. First, on behalf of UN Correspondent Association, thank you for your briefing. My question is for Dr. Tedros on COVID-19. When you're accepting interviews, you said you're seeking a chance for a second team for the COVID-19 origin in China if the authority agrees. Given the fact it's been quite some years, and this so-called COVID-19 origin issue is highly politicized now. What is the driving force? What is the consideration behind this decision, and how would that be objective? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, knowing the origins is very important, as you know. One, it's science, and second, it's a moral issue. It's science, meaning knowing the origins of this virus will help us to prevent the next one. And moral, we lost millions of people, and even billions have been affected by this pandemic, and it's very important to know why. You know, even a family who lost their loved ones, if they don't know the reason, they don't rest until they know what happened to their loved ones. So I think we have to first understand the importance of knowing the origin of this virus, and the 2 reasons why we should know are very crucial, as I said, the science and moral. And then on sending a team, you said, we may not need to send even a team. If there is, what we're asking for is full access, whether by sending a team or remote, full access to the information that China has, and we try to understand from that what happened. Of course, we can do it in collaboration with China and other countries. So what we're asking for is to give us full access. And I think this is recently I said the same thing, and we will continue to ask for that, because it's very important to know, even if it took time. It's already some time now since the pandemic started. Still, it's very important that we know. And then on the politicization, actually it could have been less politicized if there was transparency and full access. Because if you have the information, if you have the data you need, if there is full access, then it will be up to the scientists to debate on how the origin started. The reason it's being politicized is also problems related to access. So if we want this to stop being politicized, then it's the full transparency and full access that will be the antidote. So that's what we ask for. And even if some countries try to politicize it, I think the world has seen how WHO works with impartiality and neutrality. If China has concerns about, anything related to impartiality or neutrality, then we have been tested, I think. When we were pressured to do something which is not the right thing to do, we didn't succumb. So we will serve countries, we will work with countries with full neutrality, focused on science and evidence. We don't side with this country or with that country or with this groups of country or with that groups of country. We side with science and evidence. So that's why I use this opportunity again now to really ask China to really cooperate, and for the reasons that I have said, to give us access so we know what happened. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Dr. Tedros. Just a word to the media that DG needs to leave in the next few minutes to get to his next engagement, but Mike, Sylvie, and Jawad will be able to stay. So apologies if you see him exit, but this is UNGA and it's back-to-back activities. We're going to go to a question online, and that is from the I'm scrolling down. Okay, we have Sarah Heyman from Swedish Radio. How is the declaration, the pandemic declaration approved today, how is it binding? To what extent is it binding? Jawad.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very important question. In the UN system, political declarations are not binding, but they give political commitment and political guidance to different processes. And this is why this political declaration, as Dr. Tedros said, is historic and very important for the ongoing negotiation in Geneva, who will be binding to member states when they agree on the final text by May 24.
Mike.
Again, speaking from the perspective of health systems and public health systems at country level, we change the world one step at a time, one commitment at a time, one act at a time. So I would really like to underestimate the importance of this political declaration today, because this is world leaders coming together and saying this is important. We're in danger of forgetting how important this is, and we need to recommit to pandemic preparedness, because we will not forget. We will learn the lessons, and we will move forward with an accord. We will move forward with pandemic preparedness. We will improve surveillance systems. We will take a One Health approach and manage the ecosystem we inhabit this planet. We inhabit this planet with the animals, with the plants, and we're putting this planet under pressure, both in terms of climate and in terms of the ecosystem. And it needs that leadership to set that tone, and then it's for the rest of us working in it to build the governance, to build the systems, to build the financing needed. We had a for 1 year anniversary yesterday of the pandemic fund. We are making progress, but this political declaration today is important. It resonates, and it must resonate for the communities that we serve and the people in the front line. And that's our job now, is to translate this declaration into meaningful action at country level, at subnational level, that makes a real difference in the lives of ordinary people.
Mike, we have a question in the room. Can you identify yourself, please?
Hello, Jimmy Quinn with National Review. Thanks so much for taking the time during a very busy week. First, just now, Mr. DG, in your response to the previous question, you mentioned actions that caused the origins issue to be politicized. Are you talking about actions specifically taken by the Chinese government? And second, you lost a lot of trust in the US and some other countries by not talking about the origins issue early on and appearing to hew closer to Beijing's line. Do you have any regrets about how WHO and you handled the pandemic very early on? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the issue became politicized after certain actions were taken. Which actions are you talking about, and what countries took those actions?
On the politicized, I didn't say. What I said politicized is about the origin study was politicized because he said it and I said yes, it's true, it's politicized. But in order to prevent politicization, China should give full access. Politicization happens when you don't get enough information and people are taking their own assumptions to say, okay, this is what happened or this is what didn't happen. So to avoid all these unnecessary assumptions and so on, you bring all the information to the disposal of people who need it, and then that helps, scientists then to debate. When scientists debate and they believe that they have all the information, then the politicization also is gone. So that's what I said with politicization. And then with close to China, you said, if you remember at the initial stage, you remember about the sequence. They provided the sequence immediately. And we appreciated that they shared the sequence of the virus, the SARS-CoV-2, immediately. And then there were other things like, especially the measures they were taking on Wuhan to slow the speed of, spread to the rest of the world. And we identified that and we encouraged them to do that because slowing the spread is very important. And there were many other things they were doing. So we recognized those. Then some people start to say, they're praising and so on, and they're, have something with China and so on. But we don't. If there is something that needs recognition, we recognize, like any country. And then when there is something that is failing, like the origin study, for instance, they are not sharing information, we say the truth. So that's it. And with other countries, the same. I can give you a number of countries with whom we had challenges because they don't like what we are saying or what we are doing. But we stick to science because we cannot satisfy everybody. But it could be, we were in the initial stage, maybe people said, okay, there is something with China. And now China is saying, okay, WHO is siding with the West. So which one do you take? Then another country comes, and because we have said this is the issue and our position differs with that country, then they criticize WHO. So if you go back and see, whatever has been probably reported even by the media, at one point or the other, we had issues with many countries. If we have issues with many countries, it means maybe we're doing the right thing. But the allegation that we are close to China or something is an outright lie, actually. People who try to build narratives, they say that. But from what happened, start from there, and until now, if you see all the relationships we had with countries, and some of the misunderstandings with countries, sometimes with this country, the other opposite allegation with the other, it's because we focus on science. And we focus on facts. So that's what happened. I encourage you also to see, its totality, not just China, but with other countries as well. So when there is issue that we need to raise with China, we raise. With other countries, we do the same. With the U.S., the differences we had, we do. So we don't take any partiality, or we don't side with this or that. We side with science and evidence. That's why every now and then you will see today is with this country, the other time could be with the other country. So if you see the totality, you will see WHO has been trying to do its things with neutrality and not siding with anyone. We don't side with anyone, but with science. I will give you another example. Maybe forget about COVID. The debates about abortion. And recently we published a guideline on abortion care. Some countries accused us of siding with those who support, with the countries who support abortion. And I was even told you should not, as DG, take sides, and you should not talk about abortion. You shouldn't even say it. Then I said, yes, we're taking sides. But the sides are not this group of countries and that group of countries. It's not this group of countries against that group of countries. You can also, there is another, the third way. The third way is we side with science. We side with evidence. So don't discard that side. So it's not with this country or with that country. And if you take even one country, based on their political situation, positions they take on abortion differs. When the right comes to power, they do contrary. When the left comes, they support. So siding with one country, actually, or group of country, could be difficult to maintain. So the best way is to side with science and evidence. So COVID, we treated it exactly the same thing. There was no need to side with this country or that country, with this group or that group. We side with science and evidence and guide the world on how the situation is, what we know, what we don't know, and what should be done. And that's what we did from the start. And not only COVID or abortion, I can give you some other examples as well. We always stick to science and evidence. If we lose that, it's impossible even to manage if you're taking sides with this country or that country. So I encourage you to see, because this is a question that comes from many, because the narrative, the negative narrative, has been there for some time. But when you see the other things we do, I think people can understand. And thank you for that question.
Thank you, and we would be glad to send you info, because one of the things National Review probably hasn't been covering WHO that much, but we have been discussing and publicly the need for to understand the origins really since 2020. Indeed, in May 2020, the World Health Assembly formally mandated us to seek out the facts about the origin, and we've been quite public. So we can share that information with you. Thank you.
That came with
I
the
think we need to move.
WHO, not
Please, could you mute your mic? We need to call on other people. I just wanted to offer media@who.int if you'd like. Thank you. Sure, we'll take one more question. Thanks.
This is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have two questions about the pandemic. And first, about the Global South, do you believe they are better prepared now for the new pandemic if it hits? Did the WHO and the international community empower them, gave them a little bit more reasons to be resilient for the next pandemic? And the second, there was so many conspiracy theory about the vaccines of the COVID-19, so many. And some of them, introduced by credible doctors and institutions. One of them talks about the increase of cardiac arrest after the vaccine. I'm sure you went through some of them and you reviewed all these conspiracy theories. Is there any credibility in any of those theories, or just for reasons that politicizing the issue or commercial reasons or what? Thank you.
Yeah. So while starting to ask questions, I didn't want to leave the room in order to not be, not to disrespect you. So my colleagues are saying I'm already late for the other meeting, but I have a very able general here, the Deputy Director General and Chief of the Emergencies. So Mike can address, and also other colleagues here, the two issues you have, and look forward to have the opportunity some other time. So thank you again for joining us, and see you next time.
And to the media online, we'll continue for a few more minutes, but thank you, Dr. Tedros. And Mike and Sylvie and Joad will stay as long as they can, a few more minutes, and they also have engagements. As soon as DG leaves the podium, we will answer your very good questions, sir. Okay. Which of our colleagues? Okay, Mike will start. Thank you.
And maybe Sylvie can take the second part around the conspiracy theories. Actually, thank you for your point about North and South, but I would only contradict one element of what you said. I actually think the South demonstrated tremendous resilience in the face of this pandemic, without necessarily all of the resources to be resilient. Many countries in the South, many countries affected by fragility, conflict and vulnerability over many years have had to develop resilience because they've had multiple epidemics, lots of issues in terms of social and economic issues, and communities have had to learn how to adapt to a constant state of crisis in some cases. And in fact, have learned how to take services down to community level, and communities take more ownership of the issues at community level. And in fact, we talk about technology transfer, north, south, and vaccines. I actually think we could do with a bit of south-north transfer of technology in terms of how communities in the south face this pandemic, not necessarily with the resources, but with their courage and with their resilience that they have had to learn through multiple crises. And pay respect to that as well. I know you would do the same. But in the practical terms, yes, there's a lot to do to build more preparedness and build more capacity in the north and the south. The systems that failed around the world didn't just fail on a north-south basis. Our ability to protect communities failed because of lack of trust. That was everywhere. Acceptance of vaccination. Our ability to manage hundreds, thousands of people surging into the healthcare system, that failed north and south. There were huge failures in scalable clinical care. There were failures in access to countermeasures. Yes, there were failures between countries, north and south, but within countries, even the most industrialized and wealthy countries, there were severe inequities within countries in terms of who got access to countermeasures, depending on ethnicity, depending on poverty. So inequity was everywhere. And the strain on the system was everywhere. The strain on communities was everywhere. Different countries reacted in different ways, and some more successfully than others. Those countries that had in place strong community-based preparedness did much better. Those countries that had invested in social inclusion and trust did much better. And maybe Sylvie will speak to that. Just be very practical in terms of we risk at the moment losing a lot of infrastructure we've created. Let me give you an example. Before the pandemic, the 27 countries of West and Central Africa only had 5 laboratories amongst 27 countries that could do genetic sequencing and testing. Today there are 51 laboratories in those 27 countries. 3 years ago, before the pandemic, Somalia had no lab capable of doing genetic sequencing. Today it has 30 labs, 30 laboratories capable of that work. Somalia is now self-sufficient in oxygen production. We saw the scenes during the pandemic of people fighting over oxygen canisters, people desperately trying to get their older family members on oxygen. To see a country like Somalia make itself oxygen self-sufficient, my fear at the moment is we will begin to lose all of those gains if we don't continue to invest. So it's not about necessarily what we will build in the future. The first step is to retain what we've built during the pandemic, and then rebuild the trust and rebuild the infrastructure that's been stressed and strained by that. So I think we have to be very practical. We've made gains. There is technology moving now in terms of vaccine manufacturing in South Africa, vaccine manufacturing in Senegal. I visited the new Mandiba facility at the Institut Pasteur in Dakar last week. It's incredible to see the prospects of large-scale vaccine production at the highest possible level, and that investment is going in. So I have great hope that we can get there. The issue is we're going to need sustained investment, sustained effort, and we're going to need to do that over a decade or more. So right now, that's the danger. The danger is that we've got the post-COVID, we've still got that memory, and there are still resources to continue that investment. My fear is that we will lose that momentum, and that's why the Accord next year in Geneva is so important. We have to sustain the momentum. We have to create that collective sense of responsibility, those binding agreements that we will need to take us into the future. The issue on conspiracy theories is really important, and I'll hand over to Sylvia this, but I think the one thing we need to remember is to separate the issue of genuine concern that people have. I will not put any product into my family or my children unless I understand what that product is for, unless I understand the pros and the cons, unless I get to make that decision, and I do that within the context of the advice I'm receiving from public health authorities. There is a genuine value to questioning everything in life. The problem happens when people's concern or people's confusion or people's position or people's view is manipulated and attacked by misinformation and disinformation. When the very act of making the most important decision you will make, should I be vaccinated, should my family be vaccinated, that's a very important and personal decision, and it needs to be informed by the best information. But in that act, if you are being bombarded with disinformation, if you are being actively sold the wrong information, that creates a big problem, and that's what generates a lot of the conspiracy. Sylvia and her team have been doing incredible work on the infodemic in parallel to the pandemic, and maybe she could speak to that.
So thanks, Mike. And I just would like to complement also what you have done about countries being more resilient. I think that, as Mike said, I mean, this pandemic exposed the vulnerability of all countries in the world. Not the same type of vulnerabilities, because some countries did very well in taking care of patients, but then had trouble in engaging communities. Other countries did much better in engaging communities, but for many reasons, and most of the time resources, couldn't really offer the best care services to their population. So each country had to add some challenges and different type of challenges. But I think what now we see is that, and as Mike said, what is really important is not to give up. Many people are fed up with pandemic. We see this pandemic fatigue. They said, okay, now we want to go back to normal. But it's very important that there is a continued investment in health and in health system and in health workforce, because we need those systems and workforce for the next pandemic. And if we are not investing now, it will not be ready for the next one. So it's very important to maintain this approach. And we have been working now with countries to revisit their preparedness plans and see, okay, what did we learn from COVID and what should we have in place for the next pandemic? Not only fixing what didn't work during COVID-19, but also imagining what would be the challenges in the next pandemic in 5 years, 10 years, or we don't know when. And then getting our plans ready for this event. And now we have more than 80 countries that have already revisited their plan and trying also to learn the lessons from COVID, but also put in place the right measure to be more resilient next time. So I think there is a lot of hope, and as Mike said, this political declaration will help a lot because it shows to people at the field level, the ones who are really maintaining the system or working on a day-to-day basis to strengthen hospital, the learning, the treatment and so on, that the political force is behind them and they can continue to do it. So I think this is really an important message from the leaders of this world that they care about their people. So, and on misinformation and conspiracy theories, I think your question is very pertinent because we have all been exposed during this pandemic as a tsunami of information. And most of the time not aligned. I mean, there were conflicts between different sources, between different assessment. And I think it's typical of a crisis. It's not only a crisis for health, it's a crisis of the information ecosystem. And especially we see that, and that's why we have to be prepared for the next pandemic, is that this new information ecosystem is very special. Because you see that everybody is living in a physical world, but also is connected through social media to the rest of the world, and so our community is not anymore the neighborhood or community that you have at work, but it's really we are all part of a global community and interconnected. And so in this new information ecosystem, it's very complicated because there is too much information. Sometimes it's contradicting information. And so where you are, like everyone, I mean, looking at your mobile phone, you get bombarded by different type of information. And so we have seen this during this pandemic, and the complexity of the pandemic is that, you know, we were learning about the disease as we were going. We didn't know at the beginning what would be the severity of the disease, for instance, but gradually we knew. But then the virus was also evolving, so we had new variants. And then some measures came, like the vaccine or therapeutics, but we didn't know really at the beginning what would be the effectiveness of this vaccine, what would be the adverse effect, and so on. So every day we were learning something new, and so the information was not only very abundant, but sometimes we realized that what we thought was true yesterday became not so accurate than the day after. So all this very dynamic information ecosystem, this production of information, we really had to manage it. So I think this is what Mike is saying. The difficulty with this infodemic, which is an overabundance of information, is that people get confused and they don't know who to believe or what to believe at a given moment, which is normal. And I think it's our job as public health professional to help people to understand the content of this information, and also to provide them with the right information at the right time in the right format. And to do so, we need to start by listening, because you listen to people concerned, you know what are their questions, and then you can answer their question the right way. And so during this pandemic, we learned a lot, and I think even if this infodemic was hard to manage, I think we have made a lot of progress on how to manage it better, and hopefully with all the countries in the world tackling this phenomenon, we will be much better next time.
Thank you, Sylvie. Just to add one more thought from a communications point of view, not everyone in the world who needs information is online yet, right? So radio, television, the town square also remain really vital forums for engaging with people, making sure they have the tools and knowledge that they need. It's a big world. So anyway, thank you, Sylvie. We have to wrap up because our experts need to get to their 1 o'clock 13H meetings. But I thought I would ask Mike, there are a number of questions online about the declaration, just to bring it back to the pandemic, the historic pandemic declaration. And thematically, the similarities of the questions are, to what extent can this declaration help with the funding that's needed and the actions that are needed? And that there was a question about sustainable funding for WHO, but also broader funding to make sure that pandemic preparedness and prevention and actual responses have the resources they need to keep the world safe. So maybe, Mike, you can reflect on that, and then we'll close. Thank you.
That's a very big question. But the one thing I would say is that investing in pandemic preparedness right now is probably one of the best investments the world can make. This pandemic cost us millions of lives, trillions of dollars, massive disruption to the social, economic, and health fabric of the world. I can't think of a bigger disaster. Preparing for it better is going to cost billions of dollars. And that's going to be difficult in the current climate. There are lots of different needs out there in terms of development, in terms of health, in terms of poverty reduction. I was at a side meeting yesterday on wasting and malnutrition, and it's horrific to think that so many millions of children still go to bed or still go to sleep at night hungry. So despite our 21st century world, we're still dealing with some very core issues of social justice and inclusion. But we've seen we've gone off track on SDGs. Not only has the pandemic disrupted our lives, but it's actually disrupted a lot of the other goals. So the benefit of pandemic preparedness is we get to go through the next pandemic in a much more planned, much more orderly fashion, and we don't lose all the other gains we've made. So I would contend that pandemic preparedness is the best investment we can possibly make collectively as a global civilization right now. And it's something we owe to future generations. The advantages, we can quantify what that is. We know the systems that we need to build. We know the areas that we need to improve in. We need better surveillance. We need to be able to detect and predict these events better. We need to protect our communities better. We need to have a more equitable system for doing that. We need better technology, better access to that technology, access to the countermeasures needed to save lives, and we need to be able to build health systems that can scale and surge support while not losing all of the other services. It sounds extremely complicated, but if you break it down, it's doable. You break it down piece by piece, we can build a stronger system to protect communities from the bottom up. And that can be quantified over time, that can be quantified in resources. The Pandemic Fund is a fantastic new addition to that global enterprise, but we're going to need more. We're going to need to invest. As we build health systems for the future, we're going to have to make them resilient to the next pandemic. As we build agricultural systems, we've got to work with our colleagues who work on the agricultural side, on the animal ecosystem, to make sure that we're managing threats at that human-animal interface. We're going to have to look at the pandemic threats we're creating by packing millions of people into peri-urban slums without the necessary environmental, water and sanitation that they need for basic survival. So there are lots we can do, and I believe it's a really good bet, it's a really good investment. The declaration itself won't solve anything. But the first thing you do when you want to change your life on January the 1st, for those who do it, we make promises, right? I'm going to be fitter, I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to be nicer, I'm going to sort out my finances, right? And a lot of the time we don't make it. But every year we do that because we believe we have to change. We believe there's something wrong. I'm not complete, and there's something I need to do. Today was that New Year's resolution, or a resolution for a new era that the world has made. Whether we keep it or not is up to ourselves. It's a piece of paper. But sometimes in life, just sometimes, you make that promise and you keep it. and we owe it to the people of the world to keep that promise.
Thank you, Mike. And with that, Sylvie is going to jump in.
Yeah, and I think
and Jawad.
Mike has really highlighted that how important it is today, and also another dimension that is very specific to pandemic as well is when you have a pandemic, it's the entire world is affected. It's not one country, it's all countries. And this is why we need more coordination, more collaboration, and also more solidarity. And I think this is a kind of piece of paper that just show that solidarity and collaboration is there and will move us forward. So I think this was a very important message that the leaders of the world gave us today.
Jawad.
Yeah. Just to add on what Mike said on financing, in the ongoing negotiation in Geneva, financing is at the center of this negotiation on top of other very important topics. And member states are looking to the financing issue from two complementary angles. One is national financing, domestic financing, calling member states to increase their national and domestic financing and funding to pandemic preparedness. Another one is the global financing mechanism to support countries who need support to prepare themselves. And financing after the pandemic should not be seen as a charity model that we give money. It should be seen as investment in countries. When country A supports country B by providing financing to build the capacity of country B, they are not only preparing country B, but they are also protecting themselves from a future pandemic. And this notion of investment is also discussed in the negotiation process in Geneva.
Thanks, Joanne. And with that, thank you, Drs. Ryan, Briand, and Major. Thank you to the media in the room. Thank you to the media online. I've left you a message saying apologies we didn't get to all your questions, but we have very frequent press conferences hosted by DG with our experts, so please tune in the coming days and weeks. Have a good day, and thanks again.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.